I've always loved the quiet of the wilderness at night. There's something calming about being alone under the stars, surrounded by the sounds of nature. As a park ranger, patrolling the reserve after dark is one of my favorite parts of the job. It's a time to make sure everything is as it should be. No poachers sneaking around, no campers setting up where they're not allowed, and no wildlife in distress. Most nights, it's uneventful. Just the rhythmic chirping of crickets, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the rustle of leaves in the cool breeze. That night started no differently. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light spilling through the gaps in the canopy and casting long, jagged shadows across the forest floor. The air was crisp, cool enough to see my breath with every exhale. My boots crunched softly against the dirt path as I moved along, flashlight in hand, the beam bouncing off the towering pines around me. Usually the silence of the forest feels serene, even protective, like the trees themselves are keeping watch. But that night, something felt off. The stillness seemed unnatural, the kind of silence that weighs heavy in the air, making you hyper-aware of every small sound. It wasn't just quiet, it was a void, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. I paused for a moment, sweeping my flashlight in a slow arc. The light cut through the shadows, illuminating nothing out of the ordinary, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a sense of unease, a creeping awareness that the usual rhythms of the forest were missing. I shook it off as overthinking. It wasn't uncommon to feel a little spooked on late-night patrols. Your mind could play tricks on you out here. But as I continued down the trail, the unease clung to me, growing heavier with every step. As I rounded a bend in the trail, the beam of my flashlight caught something reflective in the distance. At first, I thought it might be trash, a piece of foil or an aluminum can discarded by a careless hiker. Trash wasn't uncommon, unfortunately, even in a protected reserve. I sighed, mentally preparing to pick it up and carry it back to the ranger station. But as I drew closer, the glint took on an unusual quality. It wasn't crumpled or jagged like foil, it was smooth, almost unnaturally so. My footsteps slowed as the object came into full view, partially hidden among the trees. It was metallic, its surface gleaming in the moonlight, and perfectly smooth, like polished steel. There were no seams or imperfections, no dents or scratches that suggested it had been left there by human hands. It wasn't large, about the size of a small car, but its shape was unusual, almost organic, like it had been molded rather than built. Then I noticed the sound. A faint hum emanated from the object, steady and rhythmic, almost like a low-frequency vibration. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to send a chill up my spine. The air around it felt different, heavier somehow, as if the object was disrupting the stillness of the forest. I stopped a few yards away, unsure of what I was looking at. Maybe it was experimental equipment left behind by researchers, I thought. But what kind of experiment would require something so strange, and why would it be abandoned in the middle of nowhere? The thought didn't sit right. The closer I looked, the more the object seemed out of place, not just in the forest, but in this world. I stood there for what felt like minutes, my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. My logical mind raced to make sense of it, but the unsettling hum and the almost alien perfection of the surface overwhelmed my thoughts. Something about it felt wrong. I was debating whether to step closer or turn back when movement caught the corner of my eye. My breath hitched, and my flashlight swung instinctively toward the source. A figure emerged from the shadows, and I froze. It stepped into the beam of light slowly, deliberately, as if it wanted to be seen. It was tall, easily over 6 feet, and its entire body emitted a faint, otherworldly glow. The light wasn't harsh, more like a soft halo around its form, but it was enough to obscure its features. At first glance, it was humanoid, but something about it was deeply unsettling. Its limbs were unnaturally long, jointed in ways that seemed wrong, as though it had been pieced together incorrectly. Its torso was impossibly thin, almost skeletal, and its oversized head tilted slightly, as if mocking me with its unnatural proportions. The glow that surrounded it wasn't warm or inviting. It was cold, sharp, and seemed to pulse faintly, like a warning. I couldn't see its face, but the absence of features only made it worse. The blank void where its eyes should have been seemed to bore into me, dissecting my thoughts, my fears. The thing radiated something far more than intelligence. It was malevolence, a calculated awareness that sent a chill up my spine. It wasn't just looking at me, it was evaluating me, like a predator deciding whether I was worth the effort. I wanted to run, but my body betrayed me, frozen in place as if the very air had turned to lead. My flashlight trembled in my hand, the beam casting jagged shadows that seemed to writhe around the figure. Then it moved, a slow, deliberate raising of one elongated hand. It wasn't a gesture of peace, it was a command, a warning. The motion dripped with a predatory confidence, as though it knew I couldn't escape. The silence pressed in, suffocating and charged with menace. The figure stood there, motionless yet alive with an alien energy that prickled against my skin. Every instinct screamed that I shouldn't be here, that I was prey in its presence. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just watching me, it was deciding whether to let me live. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't here by chance, and it wasn't something the world was meant to understand. And then, just as I braced for whatever terrible thing it seemed poised to do, it didn't. The figure turned slowly, its eerie glow casting long, shifting shadows as it moved back toward the metallic object. For a moment, it glanced, or at least it felt like it glanced, back at me, a final lingering acknowledgement that sent another wave of dread coursing through my veins. It stepped into the craft with a fluid, almost unnatural grace, the kind of motion that didn't seem bound by the constraints of muscles or joints. The hum that had been faint and ominous grew louder, a deep vibration that made the air itself feel alive. I stood there, paralyzed, watching as the object began to lift off the ground without so much as disturbing a single leaf. The craft rose, smooth and soundless, its glow pulsating as it ascended into the dark sky. There was no fiery exhaust, no gust of displaced air, just that haunting hum that slowly faded into the stillness of the night. Within moments, it vanished, swallowed by the endless black above. And then there was only me, standing there alone in the suffocating quiet. My heart was still hammering, my mind racing to comprehend what had just happened. Whatever it was, whatever it wanted, it had chosen not to harm me. But the fear it left behind, the feeling of being seen and judged by something beyond my understanding, was a scar I knew wouldn't fade easily. When I finally worked up the nerve to step closer to where the craft had been, I found nothing but a patch of disturbed ground. There were faint, almost imperceptible marks, scorch patterns maybe, but no other evidence that anything extraordinary had occurred. I decided to keep it to myself. Telling someone would only lead to questions I couldn't answer, and I wasn't ready to be the ranger known for seeing UFOs. Still, I can't get that night out of my head. The hum, the figure, the way it looked at me without looking, it's all burned into my memory. Even now, when I patrol the forest, I catch myself glancing at the shadows, half expecting to see that glow again. Whatever it was, wherever it came from, it left me with more questions than answers. And maybe that's all it was meant to do. If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your take. Thanks for watching.